You are listening to the Faces for the Future podcast, a podcast dedicated to exploring the stories of young creatives. My name is Jacob Deere. I'm a documentary photographer, publisher, and visual artist, and I'm going to be sitting down with creators to listen to their inspiration, interests, and process, hearing the lessons they have learned and how they broke out of the mold. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you are all doing well in these very trying times that we find ourselves in. Welcome back to the Faces for the Future podcast. This is episode 2. My guest today, how would I best describe her? She's a character, which you'll get to see very shortly. Her name is Vinny Giovanni. She is lovely, and she is a very, very talented musician. So, let's have a chat and see the story she has to tell. Lockdown's gone a little bit different, hasn't it? You were sort of taken out of action a little bit before we actually were put in this situation.
It was like I had my op on the 11th of March, and then that was like a Wednesday. We came back on Sunday, and it was that week that everything started getting serious, and then it was the week after that the lockdown happened. So I was sort of a bit housebound anyway, and then I don't know, it's almost like everyone felt sympathy and everyone's housebound as well.
Yeah. Everyone's sort of in the same boat now.
Yeah.
So how is everything? Because if you don't mind us talking about it, obviously yourself had a bit of an operation a little bit before this. You had a hip replacement, which is pretty crazy actually, because you're not much younger than myself, and it's quite scary to think that.
It's weird. I was sort of reflecting on it yesterday and thinking like it was just mental, because I was there with I was thinking of all the things that people didn't tell me prior to having it, because prior to it everyone was like, it'll be a breeze, people recover really quickly, and then after I'd had it, I was like, this is not a breeze at all. And I was sort of reflecting on all the things that people hadn't told me about. And it was bizarre because I was sort of like in the hospital with other people that are having either like hip or knee replacements. I think it was just hips that day. But they're all like twice my age plus extra. All recovering quicker than I was. And so that just made me feel really sort of like, what's wrong with me?
Yeah, no, I could imagine. It must have been a weird situation being in a situation where everybody else is potentially double your age but getting the same operation.
Yeah, and recovering quicker.
Yeah. Like,
they were all sort of, I would say, 50s to 70s. And I was there sort of early 20s, like, what sort of like going on? Like, and then like as these people were sort of up going on walks around the ward and doing their physio, I was still bedbound, and it was just sort of really bizarre, because it was like surely they should take longer to recover from it.
You'd think so.
The opposite. And although I was like the youngest patient, I gave the surgeon a good challenge, because he said it was one of the worst hips he's seen.
So for people who are either listening or watching, it wasn't like an accident that caused you to have a bad hip, was it? It was it something I remember you talking to me about. It was, you were born with it.
Yeah, it's called a hip dysplasia. But mine was sort of like a quite severe one. Like, you can sort of really get it at any stage. But mine occurred at birth, and then sort of gradually got worse with age and with, general wear and tear.
Yeah, of course.
And my dad like previous ops, and I'd just been wearing my own hip out in sort of being active and everything like that. And yeah, he struggled with it, because not only was like the hip joint like the hip joint was obviously disformed, which is why I have a new one in. But the actual pelvis where the socket is wasn't formed properly.
Okay, yeah.
Getting the artificial joint in the socket. It should have taken him sort of 2 hours, maybe less, and it took him nearly 3.
You were in there a while then.
Yeah. But it's done now. The first week was the hardest.
Yeah, no, I can totally identify with that.
But I went on a walk today. It's the first time I've been able to go on a walk.
Really?
Yeah.
That must have felt quite freeing.
It was weird. I just walked sort of up the road a bit. So definitely like the furthest I've walked. But without crutches and sort of being outside, it was just sort of really strange. I was like, my leg hurts, but also like I don't want to stop and I want to just keep walking for a bit.
Yeah, of course. See how far you can go, I suppose.
Yeah, that's sort of like my goal for this week, is to try and like walk every day, because that's going to help it recover and heal. And
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think so when you had your hip replacement, I actually had back surgery, I think, in the same week, which is quite strange, actually.
Yeah.
So I can totally sort of identify with this sort of being in lockdown and recovering at the same time. It's quite obviously mine. I was lucky that mine wasn't quite as severe as a hip replacement, but I can sort of get it. And I think that for me, especially the first sort of 2 weeks, I really struggled with just staying sort of mentally strong, because it was hard to not just feel sort of fatigued with it all.
Yeah. It was like I had sort of like a lot of drugs in my system in that first week. And I still had like a lot of like, I was given like certain medication to take when I was discharged. But I mean, it takes a while for like the anesthetic to leave your body. And although it like worn off, I had like 3 different types of anesthetic, plus all the other drugs that I was on. And so I found like the smallest little things were just literally making me burst into tears and have a meltdown.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Like, I don't know, I couldn't pick something up. Like, it was those little things. It was just, that was so difficult. And then eventually, as I sort of got back into the routine of just being at home, it got better. And then recovering slowly with like doing the physio and everything, things got easier. And then like I look back at like those first few days when I'd just been discharged, and I'm like, just the things that I had like meltdowns over are ridiculous.
I know. I literally had the same thing. Like the day I got home from surgery, I had a meltdown over a glass being in the wrong place in the cabinet. Like, I know I got a bit of OCD, but I didn't realise it was that bad.
Those little things, they proper just skyrocket your emotions.
They do.
It's
but
crazy.
It must feel quite nice now knowing that you're sort of by no means recovered, but on, the long road to being somewhat back to normal as such.
Yeah, it's Tuesday today, so it'll be 5 weeks tomorrow since I had the op. And sort of, it's like a lot of people, like my family, have said that they've sort of forgotten that I've even had it.
Really? Already?
Yeah, because I'm walking around without crutches and I'm able to do most of the things like by myself. It's sort of like I'm almost like back to like my old level, like pre-op, which wasn't great still. Like obviously because I needed the surgery.
No, of course.
But like the only things I'm really asking help for are like doing one of my shoelaces up because I can't bend down to do it, which I've always had that problem. So I think everyone's just sort of forgetting that I've
it
even
happened.
had.
Yeah. There must be a lot of excitement in knowing that the stage you're at now, which was as you were before, is only the beginning. Like you're only going to get better from here.
Yeah, definitely. That's sort of the level that was like the short-term goal that I wanted to get to. So like I was told like 2 weeks after surgery I'd be able to start physio and have like my wound dressing removed, which I got to. And then 2 weeks after that I'd be off crutches. And I was just looking at that sort of time frames. Because with like the 18 months, it's like that's a long time.
Yeah,
It sort
definitely.
of makes you disheartened a bit. So by focusing on like the short term ones, it's been nice. And they said like around like 2 to 3 months after, you'd be back to like your sort of normal level.
Mm.
But my normal level of like mobility wasn't very high anyway. So
Yeah, no. So it's actually not. It's kind of worked out quite nicely in a way, I suppose.
yeah, because I'm getting there very slowly. Like there's still some things that I can't do that I used to be able to do, but I think that it's not going to be long before I'm back to what I was doing.
Mm.
And after that, it's just like the only way is up, effectively.
Definitely.
Health is a positive.
Yeah, 100%. I think when you sort of have to go through, especially physical ailments, so a physical problem, whether you've broken your shoulder or had to have your hip replaced or something, it teaches you like a life lesson, especially if it's over a long period of time, I found.
Yeah, I think it will, definitely.
Mm.
It's been a long time since I've had to recover from any op. So this is sort of, it almost feels like my first op in a way, because all my
Really?
other ones were when I was young, and I don't really remember a lot of them. I remember sort of bits, but not
Mm.
the whole recovery. But this is something that I'll remember, sort of forever now.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, it's going to be nice to look back on in sort of maybe like 2 years and think like,
Look how far it's come.
yeah,
Definitely. So I can see the guitars in the background, and I've sort of been following yourself on social media a bit. You've been listening to a load of vinyls recently.
yes.
Um, how's everything going? I know being housebound, it must be quite tricky being a musician because you probably just want to get out and gig.
Yeah, I miss sort of going to gigs mainly because everyone that I've sort of had lined up are slowly getting cancelled, and
No, that's the worst feeling.
it's sort of taken away anything that I've been looking forward to. Because that was like the main reason why I had my op so early was so I could recover to go to these gigs. Now these gigs have been cancelled. I'm trying to sort of stay inspired almost. I know a lot of people that sort of their creativity have sort of dropped
Mm.
since being in lockdown because you can't go out and find motivation or inspiration, and you can't sort of go out and jam with other musicians or go to a gig because you want to hear the live music, and sometimes that can kickstart something in you.
Yeah, definitely.
Like a lot of people have just been sort of not writing or not producing anything just because it's like they can't. It's like their mind's not working.
Mm.
I'm just trying to not get to that point yet.
Yeah, still trying to keep your creativity somewhat at a normal level, I suppose.
Yeah, I actually think it's been sort of higher than normal, which has been nice.
That's quite nice, actually. What makes you sort of say that?
Well, I've just been sort of, I think, being able to not do much, like not being able to go out, see friends, or go here or there. It sort of just let me just focus on what I have in the house,
Mm.
which is like my records and like my guitars and everything. And even like just before this, I was just like jamming,
That's
just
so
like,
sick.
what is there left to do? So I'll just like whack something on Spotify and just like groove over the top of it.
Mm.
And I think it's sort of, I've been like sort of inspired to try and better the things that I don't think I'm quite good at yet. So like
Cool.
guitar playing is one of them. Because like I think there's always room for improvement
No, 100%.
unless you're someone like Clapton. But
Yeah, that's like a level that it's up there to try and
yeah.
achieve.
So it's just sort of sitting and sort of practicing, but not practicing. I'm sort of just having fun as well. Because I don't want to sit there and for it to be a chore and then for me to not want to do it because it's a chore.
Yeah, 100%. That's the worst thing that can happen.
Yeah, definitely.
I think I've gone through that a little bit with photography, especially recently. I've had not lack of inspiration, but it's quite, especially with the times we're in, it's quite easy to see everybody else producing images from isolation. And, you know, some of these look similar to other photographers, you know, they're similar context or even stylistically. And the last thing I want to do is make images that look like the next person's. So it's hard to find that inspiration, I suppose, sometimes. And I think by speaking with creators like yourself and other people that I'll be sort of having on the podcast as well, it's going to re-inspire and reignite something in me, hopefully, to sort of create more, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that it's an important thing to sort of stay in touch with, like, other people that create things, like, just off their own back. Like, that's what me and, like, sort of the band and everything, we still sort of chat, like, weekly. And not sort of necessarily about music, but it really sort of puts you in a good mindset. And then we occasionally tend to steer off onto the music route somehow.
Yeah.
And it's just nice. Like, I know a friend of mine bought a bass the other day because she was like, what else is there to do? So she's going to learn how to play bass.
That's cool.
And a couple of friends, they're a couple, and his mum, like, would go out into the street and have, like, a cup of tea with sort of all the other mums that are in isolation, and they just, like, chat over their walls and stuff.
No way.
And she organised a street gig for them. So James and Hannah went out into the street and set up, and they played for the whole street. Like,
that's so cool. That's such a sick concept.
Yeah, and it gives, like, everyone sort of came out and was sat on chairs and sofas in their front gardens listening to them. And it just keeps that creativity flowing over.
Yeah, I think especially hearing and seeing people learning new skills as well. It's, you know, there's no better time than now, I suppose, being sort of stuck at home to actually try and learn new things.
Definitely. I think it's a good time to sort of dedicate to something productive. But, like, I say that, but I'm not going to be sort of spending 8 hours a day playing guitar. Then it gets to that point where I think that's a chore then.
Yeah, and there's too much Netflix to watch.
Yeah. I need to sort of balance it. But even saying that, last night I watched the Bohemian Rhapsody Queen movie.
I still haven't watched that. What's it like?
It's excellent. It's phenomenal.
Really?
Yeah, it's very, very good.
I've been told it's truly inspirational in a way.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that I watched it, is because I've been feeling so sort of music orientated at the moment, which hasn't, like this, it has not happened in a very long time. And so that's been really nice, like getting really into my old music, like so much so that, like, it's all that, like, I'm watching on, like, YouTube, I'm watching, like, old live gigs of people. I was watching, like, the Live Aid stuff earlier.
Cool, yeah, that's some cool stuff.
Yeah, it's just, that's all I want to do at the moment. It's just, like, watch music or play music or listen to music. So, like, when I decided I wanted to watch a film, I was like, I'm going to watch that Queen film because it's still music related.
Definitely.
Still a good story of how they did something different and they stuck with what they wanted to do, and then they benefited from it.
Yeah, 100%. That, you know,
they wanted to do.
Their story is something quite incredible, I suppose, especially, you know, the music they produced is so iconic now. Yeah,
definitely. And it's so nice to see it, like, sort of in, like, a film, because, like, I like Queen, but I'm not someone to read up a lot about them and watch documentaries and stuff. So to be able to watch that film is like, it's very sort of accurate. There's some inaccuracies in it, as there are in like a lot of biopic stuff.
Of
But
course.
it's interesting to see like how they produced their first album of like demos,
Hmm.
and they did it really. Um, it's like a whole montage in the film where there's just like swinging amplifiers about to get weird sounds, and how when they recorded Bohemian Rhapsody, Freddie was there making Roger Taylor, the drummer, constantly sing higher and higher as he was taping over it. Um, and everyone was like, "Don't you have enough?" And Freddie's like, "No."
That's
He's
so
like,
sick.
"One, go higher." And he constantly did it to the point where the tape was nearly wearing out. But obviously, you got Bohemian Rhapsody out of it.
Yeah, definitely. That shows a perfectionist at their core, just trying to get the best out of whatever they have.
Yeah, definitely. Like someone, like he had a vision of it, and he's like, "No, keep doing it." And I like that. I like how he pushed it until he got it.
I feel like that's what you might be like in the studio. I've never seen you in the studio, but I feel like that's what it might be like.
And I'm pretty sort of chilled out in the studio, really. I'm not so much of a producer, so I prefer someone there to sort of produce it rather
Mm.
than me. Because if it's me, I'll just be like, first take, yeah, that's good.
we'll chuck that onto SoundCloud.
Yeah, so I'd rather, I prefer having someone there with sort of an act for it, and someone to sort of tell me it's not good enough, do it again.
Yeah, sort of not keep you in check by any means, but to keep you inspired.
Yeah, and to keep me like someone that can, when listening to it, thinks that's not the best you can do,
Mm.
and
Mm.
pushes you to do it again until they have the best that you can do.
I think a lot of creators need that person, whether it doesn't really matter the genre, I suppose, whether it's music or photography. And I think that sort of especially comes into its own when you're studying.
Yeah, definitely. I would have loved to have someone like that when I was at uni.
Did you not have a figure sort of pushing you along as such while studying?
I think being at a music uni, everything was very sort of laid back.
Okay.
Like it was obviously like they expected you to do work, but it was very much like you go do it. And if you wanted to talk to someone about it, that's fine. But as a student, you'd have to almost really push for them to have a meeting with them so you could discuss what you were doing.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Because for me, when I studied at, especially UNOG, that wasn't the case. It was more. I don't know whether it was because it was a master's potentially, but there was a lot of support there when needed as such.
I think like when needed and certainly dependent on module, there was support. But the only issue with sort of the uni and the lecturers was that they were all still working in the music industry.
Oh, so
So
they
they
were.
were
Yeah,
very busy.
yeah, yeah.
So I mean, my events lecturer in my last year, she put events on sort of all over Manchester, and specifically for like one of the biggest sort of venues slash bars slash restaurants slash club. It was like a weird place to
Sounds a
be.
very eclectic building.
It was sort of incredible in a way. They'd have like um, long sort of benches and tables where anyone could just sit with anyone, and a stage. And every night they had different entertainment. So like one night on like I think it was on like a Sunday, they would have like two piano players on grand pianos,
Mm,
and they would have like a piano battle. But you could ask
that's
them to play a song.
cool.
Yeah. And then like on another night they'd have like cabaret. And on another night they'd have like a covers band. And it was like every night something different.
that's what you got to love about a city, especially Manchester. You know, I've only ever heard great things about Manchester. I've never been personally, but
It is great because that's just like one place that have all those different events. But sometimes there's like one bar or venue in particular will just like specialize in one sort of event. And I remember someone came into our uni once for like a talk, and he said that Manchester was sort of better than London for live performances, because he said like it's the only place that he could think of where like you could go to like 4 or 5 gigs in one night.
Really, that many?
Yeah, it's that easy because it's quite like it's not a small city, but everything's sort of close to each other.
Quite densely populated in areas.
Yeah, and especially like all the venues are sort of quite close. So he was like, you could go to a gig here that started at 7, and you could walk up the road and go here, and then you could jump in a taxi and go there and go here. And I was just like, he's so right though. It's so easy to like get around like however many gigs you want to in a night.
Yeah, definitely. So do you sort of miss Manchester then, by the sounds of things?
Yeah, I do. I miss the fact, obviously not at the moment, but in normal times, there's always something happening.
Of course, yeah.
There's always something going on, or there's always something that you can do or go see or go be a part of. And that's really enjoyable, because going from that to a tiny town is like, I don't know, I feel like I'm moving backwards.
Honestly, I couldn't agree with you more. I didn't study in Manchester or a major city by any means. I studied in Cheltenham, but there was things to do. And then moving back, it was a transitional phase. It was weird. I'm kind of back in the routine of things as much as you can be, of course, right now. Yeah. But yeah, I think I've got used to it a little bit more, but I'm still yearning and just need to sort of find myself in another city, whether it's Bristol or whatever. But I was saying to Jake on the first episode, Burnham has got a bit better with regards to supporting the arts, I think, a little bit. I know that myself and a few other people are trying to sort of push it. Shout out to Becky, who is also trying to push the art scene here in Burnham. And that's kind of nice to see, especially sort of for a younger generation. But yourself, you grew up in Reading, which is weird because I was born in Reading, so that's something that we have in common. We've spoke about so much in the past. Yeah. So it must have been strange for you going from a city to a small town, then a city, then back to a small town.
I've done that sort of throughout my life. Like I grew, most of my life has been spent in Burnham. Like I did all of sort of school in Burnham, but I've sort of lived all over the place. And like being younger, you know, you don't really notice. It's just like, oh, and again, okay. But certainly being like sort of post 18 and doing these moves has been sort of weird, because it's like, if from like 18 we started here, then it was like Bristol, and then Cheshire, then Reading, then middle of nowhere, then like back here, all whilst being at uni in Manchester. And it's sort of like, yeah, it's I think that's why I struggle so much with sort of adjusting back here after being an adult and experiencing all those other places. And like specifically, I've always had a connection to Reading since we lived there, and I like it probably as much as Manchester, but sort of in different ways. It could be more, it could be less, depending on what it is that comes into play with it. But I like Reading because it's a town still, but it's a big town.
Yeah.
But it's still not much to do. So it's like Burnham, but it's also got all of the potential to do a lot
Yeah.
because it's near all the other big cities, sort of in the southeast. And it's still got like a fairly good music scene, Reading, primarily being the festival.
Yeah, I was going to say it's primarily sort of house music, isn't it, and festival stuff.
Yeah, there's a few like sort of venues and bars around Reading. That there's like one in particular called the Purple Turtle, which is like
What a name, by the way.
it's so cool. There's one there and then there's one in Oxford, I think. And it's like a bar and they'll have live music on, but then they'll stay open till like 3 a.m. like all the clubs do.
Hmm.
Live music will play until like sort of curfew time, so like 11, and then it'll be more like a club.
That's cool how it transitions.
Yeah, but they'll have like music on sort of most nights, certainly nights where like people go out for music,
Mm.
and they'll host like a blues festival sometimes, and
It's so
it's just,
awesome.
it's sick that they sort of get all these different musicians and a lot of like local bands as well, which I like. And I think that's sort of what I miss is like Manchester and Reading, sort of obviously more Manchester because it's bigger, more venues, but there's always sort of grassroots musicians that play gigs for like £3 a ticket, and you can go and they're sort of sometimes they'll be better than a show you could see at the arena.
Yeah, and I think, and the intimacy as well of smaller gigs, I think is really interesting. So that's it. Episode 2 of the Faces for the Future podcast is over. Big shout out, big thank you to Vinny for being the guest, and also thank you to you guys for watching. I want to apologise also to anyone who's watching the video version of this podcast. It lagged quite a lot, so the frame rate is all up and down. But to those who are listening on audio and watching on video, thank you ever so much for watching and or listening. We will be back on Wednesday with another episode for the Faces for the Future podcast. Thank you for showing all the love and support and following us on Instagram at FFTF podcast, and we will see you guys very soon.